watching people sashing past my step, by my house, in front of my door, in front of my door. Well, the church bells are ringing. Why are you singing? While the preacher moans to the sound of a slide trombone. Hey. Of a slide trombone. Are we going down in the chimney? It's me and my baby. We're all going crazy. Above jumping and we having fun. Down in the chimney, me and my baby. All going crazy. Here we go. Take me down to East Hampton, Massachusetts. Hanging out in the backyard by Jones. Having a good time all day long. We gonna roll my joint till the morning comes. Take me across the bridge to Northampton, Massachusetts. Having a good time all night long. We gonna have a party down in East Hampton till we get the man the clock off and come home. We're down in the trivia. Oh, down in the chimney, yeah. Not down in the chimney, yeah. Let's down in the chimney. Get the drummers up.
All right. Thank you, Glenn, for that amazing performance. And for those of you who are just joining, I want to welcome you to the People's DA Coalition's Candidate Forum for this November's race for District Attorney. Again, the coalition is comprised of more than 30 organizations and is a nonprofit organization itself. And so that means, of course, that the coalition will not endorse any candidates, but rather the coalition will endorse a platform of ideals that the coalition believes will end mass incarceration in New Orleans. When it comes to this election and this race in particular, the coalition has members who hold a variety of positions. And we believe that diversity of opinion, of course, makes us all stronger. So many of you know that the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. We've been building a national consensus around the causes of mass incarceration, but little attention has been paid to one of the system's most powerful actors, prosecutors. A prosecutor or district attorney represents the government in criminal proceedings. When you hear them lead a case, you hear them referred to as the people because they are supposed to represent the community's interests. They're supposed to represent the interests of the people. A lot of folks don't realize that prosecutors have, most people believe, the greatest amount of power in the criminal justice system. They decide who gets charged, what they get charged with, and what the relevant evidence is in any case. And ultimately, they decide how the system treats the most vulnerable people in our communities. So it's clear that who we elect to represent the people is critical. So we'll move to opening statements. I'm really excited tonight to be joined by three candidates who are vying to serve in the most important role in the criminal and justice system, the district attorney. We'll start with introductions and we'll do so in alphabetical order. So Arthur Hunter, you're up first. And
Okay.
I believe you have 2 minutes.
1 second. Thanks, James. I appreciate it. You know, I'm running for district attorney. And this is why. You know, if we want to be a safer city, we need a district attorney that will hold people accountable for their actions, reduce recidivism, and prosecute cases fairly without the lawsuits and the drama. I was a criminal court judge for 23 years. And during that time, I was a mental health court judge, reentry court judge, and a veterans treatment court judge. And I created a program that was nationally recognized that reduced and prevented crime. And there's one thing I learned. If you save one person, you save a family. If you save that family, you save the neighborhood. And when you save the neighborhood, you save the city. I was a New Orleans police officer, and I know we have to target violent criminals and drug gangs, because they're not only killing each other, but they're harming and killing innocent people as well. And in juvenile justice, we have to deal with what that young person did. But we also have to address those three issues within the home. Number one, we would put that child on a positive path. Number two, we would support that family. And number three, we would make that first crime the last crime. And finally, we have to use common sense. I would not prosecute possession of marijuana cases. It's legal in almost half the states, and I'd rather spend those resources on more serious crimes. And why give a young person a criminal record just for smoking weed? And that concludes my opening statement.
Mr. Harness, thank you very, very much. And now we'll go to Kiva Landrum.
Good evening. I am Kiva Landrum. I am a native New Orleanian. I graduated from Ursuline Academy, Washington University in St. Louis, and Tulane's Law School. I immediately went to work in the district attorney's office, working my way through the ranks of that office. When Eddie Jordan decided to leave the district attorney's office, I was asked to step up in a critical time to stabilize the office and become the district attorney. During that time, I ran the office with integrity and fairness, and my reputation was never questioned. I then decided to run for judge, where I was for the last 12 years. During that career, I had the opportunity to directly participate in criminal justice reform. I've worked with our local stakeholders, national and local organizations in reforming the bail practices in criminal district court, instituting the first pretrial services program ever in the state of Louisiana, and lowering our jail population in the Orleans Justice Center. My experiences have shown me what we need and desire in a district attorney, and that is why I'm running to be our next DA. I will prioritize victim crimes and violent crimes in our city, treat our juveniles as juveniles, hold police accountable and prosecutors accountable for misconduct, and tackle the systemic ills of bail practices and multiple bills. I am the only candidate in this race that has the experience of working with victims of violent crimes, their family members, and survivors, of running an office of this magnitude and tackling the issues before it, and stepping up in a critical time. And that is why I am running to be our next district attorney for the city of New Orleans. Thank you.
Ms. Landrum, thank you. And candidates, I'll ask, at least during this session, if you're not speaking, I'll ask you to turn your cameras off so that we can really zero in on the candidate who's speaking. Jason Williams, your turn for an opening statement.
Thank you, James, and welcome back virtually home. I'm the only criminal defense attorney in this race that has fought for people's rights in juvenile court, in criminal court. Project New Orleans and exonerate the wrongfully convicted. In one particular case, Greg Bright. I'm the only one here that has ever challenged the abusive police and prosecutor practices daily at Tulane and Broad. I'm the only candidate that has fought against Harry Connick as a lawyer and as a judge. When I was a judge in 2003, I presided over a case of State versus John Thompson, where the DA's office was bringing bogus, trumped-up charges against John, may he rest in power, alleging that he battered a 300-pound sheriff's deputy in his last days in jail when he was about to be released. The charges pursued by the DA's office were contrived and ridiculous, and I found him not guilty in a judge trial. I'm the only candidate that has fought to successfully expose Brady violations by every DA office, by every DA we've had to hold that office. And as council president, I championed with my powerhouse former colleague, Susan Guidry, to decriminalize marijuana in our city. And we wrote legislation to bring about municipal bail reform to get poor people out of our jails and back at home. I've worked with Vera and MacArthur to write legislation to reduce jail size. Jail size was close to 7,000 when I started my practice. Now it's close to 700 as I sit as city council president. I'm the only candidate that believes in decarceration as a policy goal. I certainly am the only one that has worked for it. I was the only one to challenge Leon Cannizzaro publicly and privately when he was issuing bogus subpoenas, jailing rape survivors, jailing domestic abuse survivors. I was the only person to challenge him yearly when he was transferring juveniles from juvenile court to adult court and charging kids as adults.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
That's your time. All right. So let's talk about the rules for this evening's event. We're going to have three sections. The first, of course, is our long form question section. In this section, each candidate will have the opportunity to answer all 6 questions that we'll present, and they'll have 2 minutes to answer each question. These questions were written by the People's DA Coalition. In the second round, we'll ask a series of lightning round questions. And this is where it's going to get kind of interesting. Candidates will be able to respond not by speaking, but instead by holding a sign. So they can hold a yes sign that they agree, a no sign if they disagree, or they can hold a waffle sign, meaning that they're unable to commit easily either way and that they're waffling or wavering on the issue. There won't be time for a candidate to elaborate or explain themselves during the lightning round. And then third, after the lightning round, we'll use the remaining time to take questions from the audience. We have staff who are monitoring our social media accounts and are using this Zoom account to bring in questions from the audience. So if you're watching live on Facebook or on Twitter right now, go ahead and post your question, and we will make sure that the staff sees it, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. So with that, we will go ahead and jump into the first long form question, which I get to ask. So, and I think we have a short graphic to go along with this question. And the question is, for too long, New Orleans has been the most incarcerated city in the most incarcerated state in the most incarcerated country in the world. According to a survey released this month from the Alliance for Safety and Justice, voters overwhelmingly prefer that resources be used for mental health response and services for victims rather than prisons and jails. In 2 minutes, please discuss the alternatives to incarceration that you will use and how you will implement them. And in this section, we'll start with Jason Williams.
Thank you for the question, James. Number one, a term you don't hear a lot of candidates talk about is I'm going to decline to prosecute some cases. Every case that you can prosecute and win, you don't need to bring. A person in the throes of a mental health crisis, a person in the throes of addiction, when there are sometimes more drugs in jail than there are on the street. So I am going to make sure that I am screening cases, refusing cases that were not constitutionally brought, making sure that people can get second chances, regardless of whether or not they go to a poor public school or an affluent private school. That's not happening right now. And I'm also going to publish the data about what cases are refused, what cases are diverted, and what cases are accepted. And I'm going to decrease the bloat of the criminal justice system so that we can focus on the crimes that matter most, people who have hurt people. And so restorative justice practices, which is a program that I'm working on finding money in the budget right now before I leave the city council so that we can make sure it's institutionalized regardless of who the DA is. 20 years from now, restorative justice will be baked into our criminal justice system budget. PTSD, mental intervention, therapy in juvenile courts and in adult courts. All of these are services that should be provided, that are provided in other cities that can help us bring mass incarceration down.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Williams. And I want to remind candidates when the question is not directed to you to please turn off your video and audio. And now we'll go to Kiva Landrum to respond to the same question.
Thank you. Under my administration, we are going to expand the diversion program so that we can get to the root causes of what causes crime. What we know is that crime is generally a byproduct of something else, whether it be poverty, mental health issues, or substance abuse, or lack of resources in our community. And so it is going to be our goal to get to those root causes and link people with the services that they need. And so we are going to partner with places such as Odyssey House, with the AFL-CIO, so that we can link people with job opportunities, educational opportunities, mental health services that they need, so that we can divert people outside of the criminal justice system. It is going to be imperative that we do these things at the front end of the system and not at the back end. And so that we can reduce recidivism, keep as many people outside of the criminal justice system as we possibly can. And that way we can prioritize victim crimes and fighting for women who have been the victims of abuse. That is going to be the goal that we seek in the Landrum administration as your next district attorney. Thank you.
Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And now we'll go to Arthur Hunter to respond to the same question.
In 2008, I became the mental health court judge for criminal district court. And I was asked to take on that position after Judge Calvin Johnson retired, and he started the first mental health court. And so we connected people in the mental health court with the services and the treatment they needed. I was a veterans treatment court judge, in which I started in 2010. And veterans who came to the criminal justice system, who came to the criminal district court, were assigned to my court, and we connected those veterans to the Veterans Administration, where they received the services they needed for PTSD, employment, and housing. And I was a rich reentry court judge, in which we sent, young people to between 18 and 25 to Angola, where they learned skilled trade, obtained a GED, and came back with a better framework. And we had a job waiting for them. And so those are the programs and the work that I did. But I also want to have an ADA available 24/7, 365 in the screening unit, to make sure that before that arrest warrant is even submitted for signature by a judge, that case has enough information and sufficient information to support the charge. That will reduce the number of people who do what we call DA time, when 6 months later, a year later, or a year and a half later, the charges are dismissed or the charges are reduced and the person's placed on probation. And those programs will reduce the number of people who are in jail and save taxpayers money as well.
All right. Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. We'll move on to the second question, which comes from Theodore Thompson. Theodore is with Eye on Surveillance, a coalition of New Orleans groups who are concerned about surveillance. So take a look. We have a short video from Theodore.
From how the district attorney budget gets spent to record a case of employee misconduct to arrest data on race, age, and the neighborhood of the accused. The DA's office holds enormous amounts of information on how our criminal justice system is actually functioning. How will you make every aspect of your office transparent?
All right, thank you, Theodore. And candidates, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question, and I'll give you a 30-second warning when you're getting towards the end. And so we'll start with Kiva Landrum.
Thank you. It is my belief that the DA's office should operate with complete transparency. And that means not just to other attorneys in the office, but to the community of New Orleans. And so as to information that we collect regarding arrest and the information as to the citizens that have been arrested, the places where they've been arrested, and anything surrounding those arrests, we will make that information available to the citizens of New Orleans. We will make it available through the data that we collect. We will do an annual reporting to the citizens, not only charting our progress, but also charting where we are. And the fact is this: we are going to ensure that our office operates, making sure that we are not utilizing any bias toward any citizen or any groups of citizens, but we're also going to partner with the New Orleans Police Department to make sure that they are not operating, utilizing any bias in their policing. And so therefore, we can have integrity in the system, build a relationship of trust with our community and our citizens, and heal this relationship that the district attorney's office has had with New Orleans for far too long.
Kiva Landrum, thank you very, very much. And next up is Jason Williams.
Thank you for the question, Theodore. The issue is not, every candidate up here can say I'm going to be transparent, but they have to tell you how they're going to do it, how they're going to get that information to the public. At the city council, working with Jeff Asher, we created 6 different dashboards that New Orleanians can look at from the comfort of their home or their car or their smart device. They can find out who's being arrested in their neighborhood for what, how many people are in jail any given day, consent decree compliance, the racial breakdown of arrests. This is the exact same thing that I have already started putting in place for the DA's office. Within 100 days, we will have public-facing dashboards showing you who is in our diversion program, what cases have been refused, and we will scrub people's personal information off so that that's not exposed. I have a very difficult time believing that judges that have not been transparent about the fines and fees assessed to poor people in their courts over the past several years are now going to turn a new leaf and be transparent about all the information in the DA's office. The measure of a candidate is not what they say, it is what they do and what their actions have shown. I have shown true transparency, and I will absolutely put it in place in the DA's office. I will also convene an advisory board of national and local folks to weigh in to continue to advise me as DA to make sure that I am on the cutting edge of progress each and every year so that we aren't doing the same thing the same way the first year as we'll be doing in our 6th year.
Mr. Williams, thank you very much. And now we'll go to Arthur Hunter.
I've already had conversations with the Vera Institute. And basically what we're going to do is two things. Number one, we're going to be transparent, and we're going to make sure that we let everybody know what we're doing on cases and that we treat in each case equally and prosecute in each case equally as well, regardless of who you are. And so we're not going to hide information, just like we're not going to hide evidence as well. And so that is what we're going to do. We have nothing to hide, and we're a public agency. And I look forward to the Vera Institute coming to work with me once I become the district attorney.
Mr. Hunter, thank you very much. And I just want to pause and I want to recognize the folks who've joined us since we started. We have almost 400 people joining us right now on Zoom, and we have another 150 people watching live on Facebook. And so we want to join all of you, and we want to remind you that you can submit questions through the question and answer function in Zoom or through the chat function on Facebook Live. So we'll move to question number 3, which comes from Robert Jones. Robert is the Director of Community Outreach at the Orleans Public Defender's Office and is a wrongfully incarcerated individual himself who was exonerated after serving more than 23 years for a crime that he didn't commit. And here we have a video from Robert.
Good evening. This is Robert Jones. In a recent Gallup survey, 1 in 4 Black men, the ages of 18 to 34, reported that they have been treated unfairly by the police within the last month. My question to you is, do you accept your role as the leader of the justice system? And how would you use that role to combat racial profiling? Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jones. And we'll start with Kiva Landrum. 2 minutes for your response, Kiva Landrum.
Yes, I accept the role as the leader in the criminal justice system, as the district attorney, to definitely work against these ills. Most importantly, I believe that the district attorney should stand at the forefront of every criminal justice issue, and this includes working against what Robert has just described in 1 in 4 Black men between the ages of 18 through 34 being unfairly treated and having unfair interactions with the police department. As the district attorney, I am going to, number 1, ensure in my office that we work against racial injustices and prosecutorial misconduct. I am going to ensure that we have at every step of the phase in our office policies and procedures that advance and work against racial imbiases. There are going to be procedures for training for the prosecutors. We will hold prosecutors accountable if there is any misconduct, and I am willing to, in fact, report the prosecutors if, in fact, that happens. But it's going to have to go a step further. because there's going to have to be communication and training with our police officers as well, so that we can definitely address this in the policing, so that we can also work with this so that it doesn't happen in the prosecuting. So as the district attorney, I stand and I'm ready to stand that we address it in every phase of the criminal justice system, not just in the district attorney's office, but to work with our police department as well so we can correct these ills and build for a better New Orleans.
Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And next up, Arthur Hunter, your response.
Thanks, James. In 2007, shortly after Katrina, I made a ruling against the New Orleans Police Department in which they were racial profiling undocumented immigrants and asking them for their papers. Right before I left the bench, I made a ruling against the NOPD again for racial profiling African Americans in the French Quarter. And as a result, that unit was disbanded and those officers are presently under investigation. And so I'm not just talking about what I want to do. I've done the work. I've made those rulings, and I'm going to make sure those same things and the same policy applies to the district attorney's office as well.
Mr. Hunter, thank you very much. Jason Williams.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, James. I'm actually floored that Kiva Landrum didn't take this opportunity to apologize to Robert Jones. I mean, Black men get treated unfairly, not just by the police, but by DAs and by judges as well. Robert Jones's case was in her court, and she kept him in jail and didn't release him, even though she was DA when there was a memo circulating that actually showed his innocence. So the unfairness needs to be redesigned from top to bottom, not just imagined. As DA, I will reject any cases built on racial profiling or illegal use of stop and frisk or any form of credibility on the part of the police department. It is not enough just to say, I'm going to be fair now. But in order to end racial profiling and end police brutality, we have to hold police accountable in court, which is why I, together with my colleague Helena Moreno, are working on building a database with the Independent Police Monitor of police officers who have hurt people. And as DA, I will keep a database of police who lie in court so that their testimony won't be used in any other sections of court or to convict anyone else. I mean, these are the things that have to happen. It's not enough just to have platitudes about how you're going to reform a system that has been racist for 300 years, regardless of who's been at the helm. We have to have real, direct, formal policy about how we will do this. And I will make sure that my ADAs are trained in implicit race bias. I will also make sure that any police chief that we have or that we get also make sure that his police officer trained on that implicit racial bias that is inherent in our system.
Mr. Williams, thank you very much. And we'll move to our fourth question for the evening, which is read by Eva Lessinger. Eva is the Director of Programs for the New Orleans Family Justice Center, which is an accredited service agency for survivors of domestic and sexual violence in New Orleans Parish. We'll see a short video from Eva.
Good evening. Too often, survivors report being further traumatized by their interactions with police, prosecutors, and the courts. Crime survivors and victims' families have been silenced, arrested, and even jailed when their needs divert from the desires of the district attorney. Survivors often seek support services and accountability from the person who harmed them, but instead are presented with prosecution and incarceration as the only options that the criminal justice system has to offer. What does restorative justice mean to you, and would you implement it?
Thank you very much, Ms. Lessinger, for that question. And again, 2 minutes for each candidate. We'll start with Jason Williams.
I am already working with Troy Bichette to create a carve-out in this year's city budget for restorative practices that will have to be used by the DA's office. That will be a line item in the city budget. What does it mean to me? It means that the victim gets heard sooner than they get heard in our typical criminal justice system. For many, many years, you have a victim sitting in the back of court waiting for their case to be called, only to find out that the DA's office is going forward with a throwdown of a simple possession of cocaine case because it's easier than that rape case. I'm going to flip that on its script, and I'm going to start working a lot faster to make sure that restorative justice can come into the fold to bring closure sooner. And with regards to domestic abuse survivors or sexual assault survivors, I formally commit, as I have on my website, we will have a policy of never jailing rape victims or rape survivors or domestic abuse survivors to compel their testimony. It only re-traumatizes and re-victimizes people who have gone through so much. And it is misogynist. It is misogynistic and sexist to think that you know better than that person about what's best for them. And in every instance, at least the instance with Ms. Canizero, the domestic abuse survivor spent more time in jail being held to testify than her abuser did because he got probation at the end of that trial. And that is a system that has existed for the past several decades in the city of New Orleans, and I wish to flip it on its head.
Jason Williams, thank you very much, and we'll move to Arthur Hunter to respond to this question.
Thanks, James. We're going to instill restorative justice, and we're going to instill it in juvenile court as well. And I'm going to partner with the Family Justice Center and have assistant district attorneys who are specially trained dealing with domestic violence survivors. We're not going to jail domestic violence survivors. We're not going to threaten to jail domestic violence survivors as well. And let me give you an example when before I retired, in which you had a 16-year-old who was charged with armed robbery, and I brought everyone back into chambers. I brought back the victim, the defendant, the kids, and his attorney, the assistant district attorney, even the kid's mother. And we talked about what happened. And that victim had a chance to tell the 16-year-old how that crime affected her. And that 16-year-old had the opportunity to also say how he apologized for what he did. And when it was over with, the case was resolved to benefit everyone. And so I'm going to bring restorative justice there. And again, partner with the Juvenile Justice Center as well.
Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. And next up is Kiva Landrum. Your response to the question, please.
I am the only candidate in this race that has spent time in my career advocating for victims of violent crime, instead of trying to dismantle and discredit their stories. What I know is this: as a judge in criminal district court, when material witness bonds and warrants were presented to me for victims who were afraid, and that is why they did not come forward, I rejected them. I understand the difference between a scared victim or witness and someone who is trying to evade the process. And that is why I rejected those warrants when presented for women who had just simply been the victim of a crime and understood and were afraid to come forward. That has been my experience, and I don't stand from the sidelines talking about that. What I can tell you is I have had the experience of employing restorative justice techniques as a judge before that was even a fancy word or a fancy technique. I have called witnesses and families in my courtroom and in my chambers so that we could resolve cases, because what I know is this: it brings healing to the situation for both sides. And so I commit to that, not just on cases that or those lower class cases, but even on some of the cases that are violent crime. And even though we may not be able to resolve them with just those techniques, it will bring healing to families. And so it is imperative that we attempt to heal as we do the prosecution of some of these cases. Now, for victims who aren't ready yet, we might have to walk them through that process, but I do commit to that.
Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And before we go to the next question, just a few points of information. One is for all of our friends who are joining us on Facebook. If you post your question in the comment section, the staff is reviewing pulling those questions in so that we can use those as audience questions. So just please continue to post right there in the comment section on Facebook Live. And then second is just a note, if you are posting a question, no matter if it's on Zoom or on Facebook Live, you have to post a question that can be directed to all of the candidates. We're going to present these audience questions, but they're going to be questions that will go to every single candidate, so they won't be able to be directed to one specific candidate. And with that, we'll move to question number 5 from Allison McCrary, who is a tribal citizen, a social justice lawyer, a restorative justice practitioner, and a death row spiritual advisor who manages the Yes and Two unanimous jury, campaign in 2018. She lobbies annually in the state legislature for abolition of the death penalty and on other criminal justice issues, and often with opposition from district attorneys from across the state. And so now we'll hear from Allison McCrary.
The Louisiana District Attorneys Association, or LDAA, wields enormous power in this state and at the legislature, historically promoting harsher sentencing, increased incarceration, and other policies that target and harm Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. As the Orleans Parish representative of LDAA, what policies will you promote internally and at the state legislature?
All right, thank you, Allison. And for this question, we'll start with Arthur Hunter.
There's going to be several things I'm going to do, Allison. Number one, I'm personally against the death penalty, so I'm going to advocate that we abolish the death penalty. Habitual offender statute. That statute is one of the reasons why we have the highest incarceration rates that we have in the country. And so I'm not going to be afraid to stand out and to step up and to speak out against association, because I've done that as a judge, and I intend to do that as the next district attorney as well, because it's the right thing to do.
Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Kiva Landrum.
I've had the opportunity to stand as a minority voice in the LDAA before, and I am willing to stand as that minority voice again. But what I do believe is that we have some very serious issues that we can build a majority coalition throughout the state to correct. And one of those would be as to bail reform. As our next district attorney, I plan to stand at the helm of those issues. One of those is bail reform, and the second is the multiple bills, so we can correct those and correct the systemic ills that they have placed on our society and correct the systemic ills that they have placed on poor and Black people in our city. And so as our next DA, I will take the lead on those and go to our state legislature so that we can make those changes.
All right, Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And next is Jason Williams.
The policies that I will fight for on the state level and the policies I'll push for with the DA's Association will be to get rid of the death penalty, to get rid of policies that allow DAs to charge children as adults, to allow them to transfer youths to adult jails, to get rid of the habitual offender law because the penalties are already high enough, bail reform, in addition to public defender parity. But let's be honest, this DA Association isn't going to like that. They're not going to like me very much. The fact that Kiva Landrum says she got along great with him when she was interim DA tells you everything you need to know about your choice in November. What I plan to do, and I've already started this work, is work with Larry Krasner and Chester Boudin out in San Francisco and Kim Fox and others to start a national coalition of progressive DAs in urban cities who get it, who believe in progress, who believe that convictions at all costs, giving as much time as you can, getting your numbers as high as you can through screening. They know it's wrong-headed. So I believe if we can form a national coalition of progressive DAs throughout the country, then we can begin to move our states after that fact. But let's be honest, this DA's Association isn't going to go for getting rid of the death penalty. I mean, frankly, I'm surprised to hear some of the folks on this line who I'm running against change their opinions about the death penalty and the habitual offender law, because when we were at forums with more conservative groups, those weren't the answers they gave. But these are things I fought for 20 years and have fought for publicly as your city council president.
Jason Williams, thank you very much. And we'll move to question number 6. So this question comes from Jerome Morgan, who chaired the public integrity table for the People's DA Coalition. And he himself is an exonerated resident of New Orleans. Jerome served 20 years in prison for a murder that he didn't commit. He's now the co-founder and co-director of Freedom Foundations, which works to provide entrepreneurial opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals, and also supports disregarded youth with their transition from childhood to adulthood. We'll hear from Jerome now.
The New Orleans District Attorney's Office has a long history of wrongful convictions and excessive sentencing. Of the 36 people that the Innocence Project New Orleans has freed or exonerated to date, 35 were young black men when they were arrested, and they were each given trials that lasted less than a day before being in prison for the rest of their life for crimes they did not commit. Given this history, would you commit to creating an inter-organizational conviction integrity unit and staff a chief integrity officer who reports directly to the district attorney and can only be dismissed for cause? This unit can comprise both a conviction integrity office as well as a sentencing review unit, and can consult with the Innocence Project New Orleans and other community stakeholders. Would you put in place a sentence review unit that will review past cases, and when the unit finds sentencing that are egregious, the prosecutor's office will give these cases a second look?
Jerome, thank you very much. And you should have introduced the little one as well. We'll go to Kiva Landrum for the first response to this question.
Yes, I will put in place a conviction integrity review unit that will, in fact, look at past convictions, not just for the integrity of the conviction, but also the integrity of the sentencing. I think that it is important to build a relationship with New Orleans and to also maintain the integrity in our criminal justice system by reviewing these convictions. So it is going to be important to look at the integrity of the conviction and the sentence. For far too long, we have relied on and utilized cases that have been, we know that the split jury verdict is a problem and that those sentences or those convictions will have to be reviewed. But we also know that the multiple offender statute and some of those premises under that sentencing has caused for a lot of unfair sentencing practices. And so I commit to reviewing those as well under my administration. My goal is to rebuild a relationship of trust with our citizens of New Orleans and a relationship of integrity. And that means reviewing any and all convictions and sentencing that is not in tune with that. And so I commit to those things.
Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And I'm told that Jerome's daughter's name is Justice. We appreciate her helping out in our coalition forum this evening. Next, we'll go to Arthur Hunter for your response to the question. Mr. Hunter.
Yes, thanks, James. 2 months ago when I made my announcement that I was running for district attorney, I stated that I was going to have the conviction and integrity unit. And I'm glad to hear now that my two opponents are also stating that they want to have conviction integrity units. But let me say this. Robert Jones was sentenced to more than 25 years for crimes he didn't commit. And I was the first one to give him a hearing. And after listening to that hearing, I settled bonding, which his family could afford. He was released, and the charges were subsequently dismissed. Kia Stewart was also wrongfully convicted. And I awarded Kia Stewart more than $180,000 because of that conviction. And so I'm not just talking what I want to do. I'm actually going to have that conviction integrity unit, make it off-site so it can be independent, and also make sure it's staffed by attorneys who never worked for the district attorney's office. So it's one thing to say what you want to do. It's another thing to say what you've done and what you will do as the next district attorney.
Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Jason Williams.
Thank you, Arthur Hunter, for that glowing endorsement of my candidacy, because the judge knows that I worked together with all my colleagues on the city council to find money in the city budget to fund the first conviction integrity unit that was housed under Leon Canizaro's office. It was a project between the DA's office and former director of the Innocence Project, Emily Mall. It had lawyers, it had investigators, and they were rooting out to find persons that were wrongfully convicted. The problem is when the rubber meets the road, when you get a DA who is just paying lip service to you, the same way that Robert Jones was paid lip service but kept in jail, although there was a memo showing that he was innocent of that crime, the DA says, oh, well, we'll give you a manslaughter, right? Credit for time served, trying to avoid a lawsuit. Well, that is hogwash. That is not justice because the person is innocent, and it means the person who committed the crime was left out to reoffend. So I've already worked to establish a conviction integrity unit, and I'm going to put one in place on day one when I become the next DA. But I'm also going to have a civil rights division that's going to keep stock of what police officers were involved in those bad cases and what DAs were involved in those bad cases. The important thing is if we are going to confront the sins of the past, we have to acknowledge the pain and havoc that the New Orleans criminal legal system has wrought on poor and black communities. And no one trained under Harry Connick, can claim to fight for justice as it relates to the wrongfully accused when you look at the number of exonerations that came out of that office and the amount of hidden evidence that appeared to be the policy of that office. I know I seem fired up here, but this is a unique moment. This is not politics. This is about changing
Thank you,
our
Mr.
system.
Williams. All right. Candidates, thank you very much for muscling through the first round in our forum this evening. So we're going to move on to a section that might be more difficult. It's the lightning round. And so I'm going to ask every candidate to start your video and get your signs ready. And so I'm going to just say these directions again for all of you as candidates, but then also for all the folks watching. So in this lightning round, candidates won't have an opportunity to respond vocally. Instead, each candidate has 3 signs. They have a sign that reads yes, they have a sign that says no, and they have a sign with a picture of a waffle. So in the lightning round, we're going to have folks to ask questions, and the candidates can respond exclusively by holding up their yes sign, their no sign, or their waffle sign. And of course, you hold up the waffle sign if you're wavering or if you're unsure or can't commit to yes or no on your question, on this question. So in candidates, when you hold up your sign, we want to ask you not to cover your face as you hold up the sign. Just hold it either just over, just under your face so that folks can see it, but obviously don't cover your face. So and again, if you've just joined on Facebook Live or on Zoom, please do submit audience questions. Submit them in the comment section on Facebook Live or the question and answer section on Zoom. And the staff is going through and pulling out as many questions as they can so that we can present those to the candidates. So we'll move on to the first lightning round question, which is presented by Ernest Johnson, who is a co-founder of the Ubuntu Village. He has a passion and energy for advocacy, for volunteerism, and it spans a period of 10 years. He's traveled around the country speaking on navigating the criminal justice system, family engagement, and leadership building. So we will pause and hear from Ernest Johnson.
The current DA continued to prosecute low-level marijuana possession charges that does nothing for the community or public safety. If you are a DA, will you file state charges for marijuana offenses that are punishable under a municipal ordinance?
All right, candidates, yes, no, or waffle. Can I see your signs all at the same time? Yes, no, or waffle.
James, he cut out. The question is a question: will you file in municipal or will you not file at all? I missed it. I couldn't make it out.
We just out of fairness, we're not going to repeat the question.
Okay.
And so, all right, so we have 3 no's on that question. All right. All right, we'll move on to question number 2, which comes from Sade Dumas, who is the executive director of the Orleans Parish Prison Reform Coalition, which is a diverse coalition of individuals and organizations committed to reducing incarceration, improving conditions of confinement, and promoting alternatives to detention. Sade Dumas.
Louisiana allows district attorneys to seek mandatory sentence enhancements for people who have been convicted of crimes in the past. Research shows that 72% of Louisiana's new habitual offender convictions had a primary crime relating to addiction, poverty, or mental illness. Will your office file for enhanced sentences under the Habitual Offender Act?
All right, candidates, your placards, please. Yes, no, or waffle. All right. We have 3 no's. Okay. We'll move on to question number 3, which comes from Rachel Gassert. She chaired the People's DA Coalition's Juvenile Justice Table and is with the Louisiana Center for Children's Rights, which fights for fairness, dignity, and opportunity for all Louisiana's children. And she'll go forward with the next question.
In 2016, the legislature overwhelmingly approved the Raise the Age Act, bringing 17-year-olds into the juvenile justice system for the first time in Louisiana's history. The law did not, however, change the ability of the district attorney to prosecute kids in adult court for certain serious offenses. This is a 2-part question. Part 1, would you prosecute a child accused of a serious crime in adult court? And Part 2, would you incarcerate a child in an adult jail or prison?
Okay, candidates, for part 1, would you hold up your placards? Yes, no, or waffle? All right. We have 1 waffle from Keith Landry. We have 1 no from Jason Williams. And from Arthur Hunter, we have also a waffle. On part 2, would you hold up your placards? We have a no from Keith Landrum, a no from Jason Williams, and also a no from Arthur Hunter. All right. Thank you very much. All right. And we'll move on to question number 4, which comes from Reverend Gregory T. Manning. Reverend Manning is the pastor at Broadmoor Community Church. He serves as the co-moderator for Justice and Beyond and as the chairman of the Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition. He also serves on the Steering and Rules Committee for the People's DA Coalition. And now we'll hear from Reverend Manning.
Evening DA candidates. In 1972, Thurgood Marshall said the death penalty was inconsistent with evolving standards of decency. Since then, the death penalty has continued to demonstrate racial bias, high costs, and disturbing rates of exoneration. Will you, as DA, seek the death penalty?
All right, folks. So on that question from Jason Williams, we have a no. From Arthur Hunter, we have a waffle, and from Kiva Landrum. Kiva, are you there? Kiva Landrum, do we have is it a yes, a no, or a waffle on that last question?
Sorry, I got knocked out of the thing, so I didn't hear it. I apologize. I got disconnected from our whole thing.
Okay. So we'll move forward to the next question. The next question comes from a dear friend of mine and mentor, and probably a mentor to many folks who are attending this event, retired Judge Calvin Johnson. Judge Johnson was the first African-American chief judge for the Orleans Parish Criminal Court and was himself a victim of a police beating when he marched for civil rights in 1964. Mm-hmm. He's the facilitator of the People's DA Coalition. Judge Johnson.
Good afternoon. Though communities have long been advocating for an end to racist policing and brutality from law enforcement, recent protests following the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Trayford Pellerin, and many others have made crystal clear demands for justice and accountability. According to the Very Institute, Black people are killed by police at almost 3 times the rate of white people. When the victim is unarmed, the racial disparity is even greater, with Black people 4 times more likely to be shot and killed. Will you hold law enforcement to the highest standards of accountability and file criminal charges against them when they break the law?
Judge Johnson, thank you very much and good to see you. And we have yeses from all 3 candidates on that question. Thank you very much. And we'll move to the next question, which comes from Ben Coyne, who's the counsel at the Promise of Justice Initiative. Ben was a member of the Unanimous Jury Coalition. And he was also the counsel of record in Ramos versus Louisiana, which held non-unanimous juries to be unconstitutional. And so now we'll hear from Ben Coyne.
There are over 1,600 people serving lengthy sentences based upon non-unanimous convictions. Orleans Parish has the largest number. The Supreme Court has recognized that Louisiana's non-unanimous jury system was a vestige of Jim Crow and a continued stain of racism on our justice system. The Louisiana Attorney General has taken the position that individuals whose convictions are final are not entitled to relief. Chief Justice Johnson has written in dissent that procedural bars should not prevent people incarcerated by non-unanimous verdicts from getting a new trial. The elected DA will have the unilateral authority to decide whether to invoke procedural bars in Orleans. If elected, will you support the grant of new trials for people with final convictions based upon non-unanimous verdicts?
Ben, thank you very much. And we have yeses from all 3 candidates on that issue. Thank you very much. And then we'll move to Ben's colleague, Jamila Johnson, who will read the next question. Jamila is the managing attorney at the Promise of Justice Initiative's Jim Crow Juries Unanimous Jury Project. And she also served on the steering committee for the Unanimous Jury Coalition and Louisianans for Prison Alternatives. We'll hear from Jamila now.
Good evening. According to the New Orleans Alliance for Equity and Justice, many New Orleanians sit in jail for weeks and months simply because they do not have the money to pay bail, while those who do have the money are released. While awaiting trial, people lose their employment, their income, and their ability to adequately contest their arrest. Our justice system continues to force families into cycles of poverty. And in 2015, 84% of bond premiums and fees were paid by Black families, totaling $5.4 million. So my question for you is, will you advocate for pretrial release without the use of money bail as the norm rather than the exception?
Jamila, thank you very much for that question. And we have 3 yeses in response to that question. We'll move on to the 8th question, which comes from Martha Alguera, who is with Voices Unidas, a Louisiana Immigrants' Rights Coalition. She works fervently to better the lives of Louisiana's undocumented residents. And she'll read our second to last question. And so I'll turn it over to Martha.
Would you oppose all immigration-related arrest of anyone involved in pending case or cases under investigation?
All right. Yes, no, or waffle? All right. We have 2 yeses from Jason Williams and Arthur Hunter, and we have a waffle from Kiva Landrum. All right. Thank you all very much. And we'll move to the last question from this lightning round. And as we do so, I'll just remind folks on Facebook Live that you can post comments in the chat, and that the staff will pull those questions to submit them during the next component of our event this evening, which is the audience component. And then, of course, folks can submit questions on Zoom in the question and answer component. All right. So the last question comes from Simone Levine, who is the executive director of Court Watch NOLA, and she's a founding member of the People's DA Coalition. And we'll hear now from Simone.
Good evening.
formerly incarcerated, their loved ones, crime survivors, exonerees, advocates, and over 30 criminal justice reform organizations have come together in order to create our platform, the Roadmap to Reform. If elected, would you agree to participate in an annual People's DA Forum as a means of being held accountable to the community for the commitments that you have made during this campaign?
All right. Thank you very much from Simone, and we have 3 yeses in response to that question. Thank you, Jason Williams, Arthur Hunter, and Kiva Landrum. And I'm told that we are going to go back to the question from Pastor Manning and replay that question since we weren't able to get responses from all 3 candidates. And so if we have that question queued up, we'll run the question again from Pastor Manning.
Evening DA candidates. In 1972, Thurgood Marshall said the death penalty was inconsistent with evolving standards of decency. Since then, the death penalty has continued to demonstrate racial bias, high costs, and disturbing rates of exoneration. Will you, as DA, seek the death penalty?
All right, so we have a no from Kiva Landrum, a no from Jason Williams, and a waffle from Arthur Hunter. All right. Okay, and I believe that we're going to also, just out of fairness, go back and do the first question again because Jason Williams I think didn't hear that question. And we wanted to make sure that that we're being fully fair. And so that first question came from. Let's see here. Going back a little too far in my notes here. The first question that we have it queued up came from Ernest Johnson, and if we're ready, we'll run that question now.
The current DA continued to prosecute low-level marijuana possession charges that does nothing for the community or public safety. If you are a DA, will you file state charges for marijuana offenses that are punishable under a municipal ordinance?
Okay. So on that question, we have a no from Jason Williams, and we have no's from Kiva Landrum and also from Arthur Hunter. All right. All right, candidates, thank you very much. How you doing? You still with us? You all right?
All good, baby.
All right, good. All right. We're moving into the last section.
Good, James.
Good, excellent. All right. And so in this last section, the questions come directly from the audience. And I want to thank the audience for participating. There are 135 people watching on Facebook Live. There are 386 people who are watching on Zoom. We've had at least 60 questions submitted through Zoom and more questions than I can count submitted through Facebook Live. So I promise, however, we're not going to ask all 60 questions. We've selected, tried to combine them in a way that can best represent the issues that are being brought up by the audience. So for these questions, the candidates, you will have 1 minute to respond. And so we'll go ahead and jump into it. The first question, it comes from Zoom attendee Kelly Orions. The question is, much of the wrongdoing during the Canizero era, including but not limited to the fake subpoena scandal, constitutes not only professional misconduct, but also potentially criminal wrongdoing. Will you commit to investigating potential criminal misconduct by Canizero and his district attorneys? And we'll start with Arthur Hunter on that question.
Yes, James. I'm going to create a special counsel office, and that office would actually be the lawyer that gives advice to the district attorney and also represents the district attorney's office in litigation. But also, as part of that unit as well, I'm going to have assistant district attorneys who will investigate any allegations of misconduct by those assistant district attorneys. And we're going to take the appropriate action, whether it means reporting to the bar, whether it means terminating that employee, or even filing criminal charges against that employee.
All right. Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Kiva Landrum.
Yes. And so I believe that the issue of the subpoenas is still under litigation. And I think that once that litigation is concluded, then the office will be able to look at the actions of those attorneys and as well decide what is the appropriate action to take at that time. Under my administration, we will also create an environment where prosecutorial misconduct will be shielded, not shielded, the reporting of it will be shielded, and so that people will be able to feel comfortable coming forward, reporting any prosecutor that has engaged in misconduct, and so that we will take the appropriate action in reporting that misconduct and also going forward if there is any criminal charges that need to come forward from that as well. We will hold prosecutors accountable in the same way we will hold police officers accountable for any misconduct.
Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Arthur Hunter.
I think it's me, James.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was supposed to be Jason Williams.
I will absolutely, positively, if there was wrongdoing done on the part of Leanne Canizero or any of his ADAs, I fully plan to investigate it and prosecute it if there is criminal wrongdoing. I believe that's why I have a little bit of a target on my back in this race right now. I will also make sure that as I run the office, if someone under my charge engages in wrongdoing, they also will be held accountable by the law. They will be fired. They will also be turned over to the Bar Association. And I believe no one should be above the law, the past DA or any future DAs.
All right. Thank you very much. And the next question comes from Lori Dunn, who is joining us on Zoom. And her question is, the governor recently signed into law Act 99, which provides parole eligibility for certain juvenile offenders sentenced to life without parole. For juvenile offenders previously sentenced to life without parole, will you support parole eligibility? And on this question, we'll start with Jason Williams.
I absolutely will, James. I believe that the science is very clear, that the juvenile brain is not fully developed. And that is why the criminal justice system bifurcates itself between adults and juveniles. So I absolutely will do that.
All right. Jason Williams, thank you very much. And next, Kiva Landrum, your response.
Yes, I believe that it is our goal and should be our goal to rebuild families and restore communities. And that also means that we should stand with giving parole eligibility to juveniles who are seeking parole.
All right. Arthur Hunter, your turn.
You know, James, in the case, let me tell you about the case of Joseph Morgan. Joseph Morgan was a 16-year-old who was convicted of murder. And because he was represented by the Public Defender's Office, they made a motion to allow him to have life with parole because they couldn't afford to represent him the proper way. And I sentenced Joseph Morgan to life with parole. And so I'm going to get with and work with Carol Kolenchak with the LCCR, and we're going to get a list of those kids who are now serving life sentences, and we're going to review each and every one of those cases.
All right. We'll move on to Chris Kaiser from the ACLU, and Chris's question is: Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in the nation, costing taxpayers more than $1 billion each year. Will you commit to a goal of reducing Orleans Parish's prison admissions by a specific percentage during your first term in office? And we will start with Kiva Landrum on that question.
My commitment to reducing Orleans Parish Justice Center's numbers has always been there. As the Chief Judge of Criminal District Court, I worked with the city and with our local stakeholders in making sure that we reduce the jail population. I will keep that same commitment as our district attorney to make sure that we are doing what is right by the citizens of New Orleans in reducing our jail population, making sure that we have fair bail practices, making sure that we prosecute fairly, and that we advocate for fair sentencing. So yes, that is my commitment to New Orleans.
All right. Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Jason Williams.
I absolutely will. A lot of people talk about reentry, but I think the bigger conversation is entry, who we are funneling into the system and why. I absolutely will be able to give a percentage within the first 100 days. Right now, all the data in the DA's office is a vault. I have been demanding it. Former Mayor Mitch Landrieu and former council member Susan Guidry and I have been demanding that data so that we could see what was going on behind those doors. Once we get it, we'll be able to give a percentage. But I can tell you that right now, by not going forward on addiction issues and mental health issues and diverting those things and declining prosecutions when police have either abused or engaged in racial profiling, we are going to greatly reduce the lion's share of cases on the court's docket. It has to happen.
Jason Williams, thank you very much. And last but not least on this question is Arthur Hunter.
Thanks, James. I'm going to use my mental health court experience when I was a mental health court judge. And we're going to bring together mental health professionals. We're going to do what they're doing in Miami and what they're doing in Seattle. We're going to create a program that if you have a behavior disorder and you commit a nonviolent offense, instead of taking you to OPP or AJC, as they call it right now, we're going to establish a crisis stabilization unit, or basically a community mental health center, and take that person to their community mental health service with system in which they receive the services they need. And if they complete those services successfully, I will dismiss the charges.
All right. Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. And our next question comes from Gerhard Weiss, who's joining us on Zoom. And Gerhard asks, do you support defunding the New Orleans Police Department and the District Attorney's Office in order to increase funding for the Orleans Public Defender's Office for community programs and for education? It's been shown that that this kind of action can decrease crime and incarceration. Would you support an effort by OPD to achieve parity in funding? And I'm sorry, we'll go to Arthur Hunter first on this question.
James, no one has done more to make sure that poor defenders who can't afford attorneys make sure that the Public Defender's Office is adequately funded. I started that in 2007 after Katrina, in which I issued rulings and subpoenaed the governor, subpoenaed legislative figures to make sure that they fulfill their responsibility to adequately fund the Public Defender's Office. Look, I've told Derwin Bunton, when I become district attorney, when it's time for him to go before the city council, I would be there sitting next to him, advocating for more funding for the Public Defender's Office, because even if you don't consider someone's constitutional right to have a lawyer to represent them because they can't afford one, if the Public Defender's Office goes out of business, the system stops. And that doesn't help victims, witnesses, or even a defendant to have his rights complied with. And so I would have no problem. And I'm not going to change my stripes once I become district attorney and make sure that the Public Defender's Office has adequate funding.
All right. Thank you, Arthur Hunter. And Jason Williams, you're next.
Well, as city council president, I authored legislation demanding parity now. And I will absolutely continue to fight that case and press that case as DA. And let me answer the whole question. Yes, I will publicly agree for my office to take less money from the city coffers so that we can have a fair fight in court. I believe the DA's office can be run more efficiently than it's being used now. Right now, there's a lawyer there who's getting paid over $100,000, doesn't try any cases. It's just a cush job because he's friends with the current DA. I look at that budget every single year, and I know I can scrub it, and I know I can return money back to the city so that the public defender's offices can have parity, and so that we can continue to invest in early child education the same way I moved $1.5 million away from the police department so that we could fund early childhood education. We're the first municipality in the country to do that. And I will continue to push for those things at City Hall as DA, because I believe it is better to build strong boys and girls than to try to repair broken men and women. Frederick Douglass said that a long time ago, but the criminal justice system has just yet to listen.
Thank you, Jason Williams. And next we'll hear from Kiva Landrum. Kiva Landrum, your response to the same question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I do believe in parity for the Public Defender's Office, and I, as the district attorney, will advocate for that. I believe that in order for this justice system to work fairly for everyone, there has to be parity in the system and parity for their office so that all of the offices can operate the way in which they should. And as to your question about defunding the police department, I also believe in that to the extent that the police department, where we should send those resources to other social services and other programs in our community. I believe that the police should not have to deal with and act as the mental health experts in our community. And that way they can focus on fighting violent crime and keeping New Orleans safe. So yes to both parts of the question.
All right, Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And our next question comes from G. Park. G. Park's question is as follows. One of the drivers of racial injustice is who and how police choose to stop and arrest proactively. As district attorney, will you commit to leading the effort to stop proactive policing? And if so, how would you go about doing so? And we'll start with Kiva Landrum on that question.
As district attorney, I would definitely consult with the police department so that we can discuss and address the racial issues that surrounds proactive policing. I know that for far too long, the way in which we have policed certain neighborhoods and certain people has been unfair, and we need to definitely address that situation. And so, yes, I will sit with the police department. I will take that and lead the effort and be at the forefront of that issue. I believe that we need to address every issue that addresses fairness, that addresses racial bias, and how it affects our community. And as our district attorney, I will take the lead on that.
Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And next we'll go to Jason Williams.
It reminds me of the very first motion hearing. That question reminds me of the very first motion hearing I had before retired Judge Calvin Johnson, in which a police officer said that he had done this raid in a housing project because it was a high crime, high drug area. And I asked that officer on the stand if he had ever visited a college dormitory on Tulane's campus, because there's a whole lot of drugs there, because I've seen them myself from when I was there. But they don't investigate those neighborhoods the same way. So what I'm saying is, as DA, I am going to help the NOPD craft policy so that they are not being over policing certain neighborhoods while underserving other neighborhoods. So absolutely, that is racial profiling of another hat. I will also make sure that just as we set up tiger teams to deal with gang activity with former Chief Mike Harrison and to deal with the murder rate and to bring that down, I will work with him on car burglary policies so that we can make sure that we have a faster response time to build better cases and actually make our community safer. So absolutely, I plan on working hand in hand with the policy of NOP leadership to help guide them to reduce crime. Winning at all costs should not be the answer. The goal I want to set is not how many people we convicted, but real public safety metrics. What crime numbers did we bring down in the city of New Orleans?
Thank you, Jason Williams. And next we'll hear from Arthur Hunter.
Thanks, James. Look, I'm not just going to have a conversation with the chief of police, because I know those conversations go being a former New Orleans police officer. But this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have myself, my first assistant, my chief of screen, and my chief of trials, and we're going to go to each and every one of those roll calls and talk to those sergeants and those police officers and tell them what we expect from them as police officers. And it's simple. It's what they taught us in the academy, that your investigations will be complete, they be thorough, and they be constitutional. And it's that simple. And only then, when those officers actually see you there, talking to them eye to eye, face to face, will they understand. And being a former police officer, I won't be swayed And they won't even try to say, look, you don't know what it is to be a police officer. Our lives are on the line out here. Yes, I do. I was a police officer. I went to law school while I was on the police force. And so those are expectations we're going to have with the police department.
All right. Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. And the next question comes from Bree Anderson. Bree Anderson is the daughter of wrongly incarcerated New Orleanian Robert Jones, and she's joining us on Instagram. Her question is, how will your office gain trust from the community and the youth of New Orleans who don't trust the criminal justice system because of so many wrongful convictions and, frankly, because of the reputation that the current DA has? And we'll start with Jason Williams on this response.
It's a couple of things. So number one, the wrongful conviction unit that we're going to have in place, over time, it's going to rebuild trust when we take people from jail and we return them back to their families and communities and homes. And that's going to start rebuilding trust, right? Because we're also going to go after the actual perpetrator. The other thing I'm going to do as DA is I'm not just going to sit in the office, do the same thing I did as council president. I'm going to go to schools. I'm going to go to communities, and I'm going to talk to them, and I'm going to listen to them to hear what's going on in community and in neighborhood so that we can actually understand how to best serve and meet the needs and increase public safety. When we were trying to figure out the rash of car burglaries in the city of New Orleans, and it appeared that there were a number of young people involved in them, I went to schools and I met with young people and I heard from them about why they were engaged in this activity. If they knew people who were engaged in activity, what was there to gain? And I learned that there were adults who were buying hot guns, right? And so it allowed us to start crafting policy with the police chief so that we could do things to get rid of the root causes and the market that exists that was pulling kids into a life of crime. Not just cat and mouse, go catch somebody after they did it, but get in front of it. And I'm going to do that exact same thing to rebuild trust in the community, because the community is right not to believe in DAs right now, based on what they've done, all of them.
Thank you, Jason Williams. And next we'll go to Kiva Landrum to respond to that question.
Thank you. So, of course, we are going to change the way the office operates and change the culture within the office. That means changing the screening policies, building up a victim witness unit that acts with integrity and builds relationships of trust. But more importantly, I think about my experience as an assistant DA. And I am, to this very day, still in contact with a lot of victims and witnesses in cases that I prosecuted. And so what that means is acting with integrity, building relationships, and making sure that people know that they can trust you in everything that you do. And that is the type of office that I intend to run. That is the type of integrity that I want to ensure exists within everyone that we employ, to make sure that we employ people that reflect the community of New Orleans. And when we do these types of things, then the community can trust the work that we have, and we will build that relationship. And so that is what it takes. And it takes somebody who's done it before, and I've done that before.
All right, Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And next to Arthur Hunter.
Bree, is that question is simple, but it takes work to do that. I mean, when I joined the police department after I graduated from the academy, I went to the Urban Squad, which was the first community policing unit in the city of New Orleans, and I patrolled the housing project. And so when I became a judge, I continued being involved in the community. But not only that, Bree, when people came in Section K, they were treated fairly, they were treated with respect, regardless of who they were. And so my reputation in the community, being fair, treating people with respect, I'm going to bring that to the district attorney's office as well. And it won't just apply to me. It's also going to apply to every employee of the district attorney's office. And I'm also going to bring the police department in this as well. And look, it may have to be where the police department, the DA's office, will have to take 2 or 3 steps before the community takes 1 step. And that can only be done when we bring integrity back to the criminal justice system, and then we can have confidence in the criminal justice system by the people.
All right. Thank you, Arthur Hunter. And now we have a question from Darlene Jones. And Darlene Jones wants to know, how long can a person be held? And she's talking about in a pretrial context, and for any reason. how long can they be held before you would consider their speedy trial rights having been violated? And would your administration commit to dismissing cases in circumstances where the Canizero administration has held people for too long? And we'll start with Arthur Hunter on that question.
As I stated earlier, I'm going to have, in our screening division, we're going to have the ADA available 24/7, 365 to make sure before that arrest warrant is submitted to a judge that the arrest warrant has sufficient information to support that charge. But I'm also going to review those cases that are there right now, evaluate those cases, and determine whether or not there's probable cause to bring charges and to convince 12 people of the guilt of that person. And so, yes, we will evaluate that, and we will work as quickly as we can, because we don't want people who to be in the system no longer than what they have to be. And so I'm going to make sure that we work with the NOPD to make sure we get those reports, to make sure we get them timely, make sure we get them evaluated, and make sure if we bring charges, we bring those charges promptly. And if the information isn't there, dismiss the case.
All right. Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. Next up, Jason Williams.
I'm going to work as efficiently as I can to try to correct all of the ills and atrocities that have come about as a result of Leon Canizero. I'm going to work my office and my ADAs and my screeners will be committed to charging an accused within 5 days, inclusive of weekends. And if we can't work it out faster than that, then we would, of course, be willing to release a person without bond. That really goes to the holistic viewpoint of this thing. That DA time that people are serving is largely based upon the fact that DAs and judges have people sitting because they're too poor to put a couple $100 together. And so I would definitely support a person coming back and forth to court from home rather than jail, in addition to that.
Jason Williams, thank you very much. And next up is Kiva Landrum responding to that question.
Anybody that is sitting in jail on a nonviolent, low-level offense and cannot articulate any threat to the community pre-trial, that's been too long. And that's just simply it. And so our goal should be that only violent criminals who are have an articulated threat to our community should be those that are sitting in jail pre-trial. And so there is no number or date or time that I can place on that. It's just that simple standard. Now, as to the part of the question about dismissing cases from Canizero's administration, it is going to be important as we take office, as I take office, to look at what is sitting on the court's dockets. What I know is this: we have been sitting in a pandemic for approximately 10 months now with no movement in our criminal justice system. So what I commit to is looking at every low-level, nonviolent case and trying to push those through the system, whether that be dismissing it, offering diversion, or trying to negotiate those cases out, because we are now going to have to prioritize the violent crime cases. And so I am going to be aggressive with moving those cases out of the system on the nonviolent low-level cases.
All right. Thank you very much. And our next question comes from Shanita Ferris, and she asks, will your office seek the death penalty in first-degree murder cases? And we'll start with Kiva Landrum on that question.
What I know is that the citizens of New Orleans have made it extremely clear that they do not want the death penalty. And so with that being said, I recognize that the death penalty has proven to be too costly to pursue. It does not heal for victims and their families. And also it is not deterrent for crime. And so with that being said, it is not my intention to seek the death penalty. I know that we have not executed anyone in Louisiana for over 10 years, and we currently have over 67 people sitting on death row. So it does not seem beneficial in any way to seek death penalty in New Orleans.
All right, Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. Next, Jason Williams.
I am firmly and squarely against the death penalty. I am the only person who has been fighting against the death penalty for 20 years. I'm glad, though, of this sea change. I'm glad to see Kiva Landrum and Arthur Hunter changing their views on the death penalty. It is morally reprehensible that a city and a state with the highest exoneration rates could ever think about putting someone to death. I am firmly against it. I have fought against it my entire career, and I will continue to do so as your next DA next year.
All right, thank you, Jason Williams. And finally, Arthur Hunter.
Well, it's not a sea change. You know, I presided over 3 death penalty trials, and even though I'm personally against it, those trials ended in life sentences and a mistrial. And you know, it's a difficult answer, but I will only maybe consider it in the rarest of cases. And for instance, like the Dylan Roof in South Carolina, where he went in the church and prayed with people for an hour and shot and killed those people. Or locally, we have Damon Jordan, who, you know, shot and killed a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old and the 17-year-old and their mother, 25-year-old mother. And only then I will only consider it. It won't be automatic. I would take in consideration in the mental health issues. But, you know, again, you know, it just as Kiva stated, you know, you have to be able to also convince a Orleans Parish jury whether or not they can present and come back with a verdict of the death penalty. And so I will consider it in the rarest of cases, only consider it, and it would have to be extraordinary circumstances for that to happen.
Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. The next question comes from Kendall Dix, who's joining us on Zoom. Kendall asks, some of the candidates here have policies now that don't reflect their recent records. For example, some have already had the opportunity as judges to grant motions to require unanimous juries and chose not to. Everyone on the panel now says that they would use their discretion to grant new trials for people who they may have in fact had a hand in convicting. For all the panelists, what is one thing that you regret doing in one of your former positions, and how did you learn from that thing that you regret? We will start with Arthur Hunter on that question.
I can't think of a case in which I regret it, but let me tell you this. I have made rulings in probable cause hearings and motion to suppress evidence and statements. And even though I may have made a ruling in favor of the state, but after thinking about it, further consideration, I came back the next day and put on the record that I believe that what I stated was a mistake. And I made the proper ruling as a result. And so I don't have any particular case in which I regret. I was, the trials I had, I was only reversed one time in a trial of my 23 years on the bench. So I tried to make sure that I knew the law and that I made sure that the defendant's constitutional rights were complied with. And so I can't think of a particular case in which I have any major regrets.
All right. Thank you, Arthur Hunter. And next we'll hear from Kiva Landrum.
I don't have any regrets as to any particular case, but what I do regret is that as a judge, we are bound by the rules of professional conduct that don't allow us to personally stand up and give our reasoning for some of the decisions that we make. And I do regret that as judges, we don't have the ability to stand up and use our voices to promote or to advocate for certain rules or laws or to change certain laws. And so it ties our hands oftentimes, and I think that the citizens of New Orleans don't get to hear our personal opinions on things. And so while we may have to rule a certain way, it does not mean that we particularly feel that way on any particular issue. And so while, we may have denied a motion for a unanimous jury verdict, it does not mean that that is our particular personal feeling. And I know in my case it was not, but the law mandated that. And so I regret that as judges, we do not get the opportunity to stand up and get on a soapbox and grandstand as other people do, and that the law ties our hands oftentimes because the rules of professional conduct want judges to act a certain way. But what I can vow to you is that as our next district attorney, I will stand up and use my voice in the way in which the rules of professional conduct did not allow me to do as a judge.
All right. Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And next up, Jason Williams.
Well, I can tell you the law tried to silence and keep Ruth Bader Ginsburg quiet as well, but she didn't stay quiet. And a judge can speak out, and a judge can take a strong position because laws, every law in Nazi Germany was on the books. Everything that was done was on the books. It was the law at the time, and sometimes people have to stand up to try to change laws, even if it means getting reversed. So I can tell you the thing that I regret most was not raising enough money to get my smart on crime policies out in 2008 and beating Leon Cannizzaro, because I could have saved the people of this city a lot of pain and a lot of heartbreak, because I knew what that man's policies would bring to the city of New Orleans, and I failed in that race to convince the people of the city of New Orleans that the policies that I'm still talking about today, that I talked about back in 2008, are the things that would make this city safe and reform this system. God bless you, James.
Thank you, Jason. And we'll move on to a question from Angelique Thomas. Did you ever sign a subpoena for a material witness warrant that resulted in a crime victim being jailed? And we'll start with Jason Williams on that question.
No, never have. Never would. In fact, I fought Leon Cannizzaro publicly from City Hall every single time he did that, every single year. And when I was a judge in 2003, I never did as well.
Thank you. And Kiva Landrum?
No, I did not. In fact, I rejected material witness bonds in my section for witnesses who were afraid to come forward and testify.
All right. Thank you very much. And Arthur Hunter?
No, I don't believe I have, James. And really, I was hoping that the ADA, the Assistant District Attorney, would bring a material witness warrant before me, because I would do what they did in Texas. In Texas, if you have a material witness warrant, you first have to give that person due process, which means they have a right to an attorney, and they have a hearing to determine whether or not the evidence and the information is necessary to even issue a material witness warrant. So I was hoping and ishing that Assistant District Attorney would do it. I strongly suspect that if they had done it, it wouldn't have been to their liking. And that's probably why it wasn't done at all in my section of court.
All right. Arthur Hunter, thank you very much. And the next question comes from Jennifer Hall, and she works with an organization that I have a lot of respect for. That organization is Women with a Vision. And what she says is, we at Women with a Vision know that the majority of people that are criminalized for sex work-related offenses are survival-based sex workers. We know this from not only our 30 years of working with survival sex workers in New Orleans, but also from our diversion program that operates out of municipal court. Are you willing to refuse to prosecute anyone arrested or cited for sex work-related offenses? And then she offers a note. She says, please keep in mind that any charges related to trafficking or offenses related to minors under the age of 18 are covered under federal law. So we're only talking about adults engaging in sex work. And we'll start with Kiva Landrum for that question.
Yes, I believe that any activity between two consenting adults should not be criminal. But I do think that we should be mindful of any people that are being victimized or trafficked. And so we should protect them under the laws. But any consenting adults, it's not my business.
Jason Williams?
I know Women with a Vision's work, and I absolutely agree with Mrs. Hall's appreciation, and I would not. I think it is a waste of vital resources that could be focused on much more serious crime. And I also know that police officers working in Vice, at least in New Orleans' history, have actually engaged in abusive practices against sex workers and against folks in the trans community because they felt marginalized. So I absolutely will stand with Women in a Vision to help craft the policy for my office, that advisory board I talked about. I hope to have Dion Haywood or others or another representative to help guide DA policy moving forward.
All right. Arthur Hunter?
You know, James, in 2000, I ruled the Crime Against Nature statute unconstitutional. And so I look forward to working with Deon Haywood to make sure that we don't waste time, we don't waste money and resources in prosecuting the sex workers.
All right. Thank you very much. And candidates, how are you feeling? We've made it through all three sections of our forum tonight, and we're getting ready to move on to the final component. Are y'all still with us? Zoom
let's do another 2 hours. Let's do another 2 hours.
Look, Jason is saying that because he loves to make long arguments and long closing arguments.
Well, I would love to join for another 2 hours, but my wife is messaging me with pictures of my kid and telling me I got to get home and read her a bedtime story. So
you better get home.
That's
you
right.
Better get home.
So we're going to move into your closing statements. So just a short statement here. We're going to wrap up the closing statements from each candidate. We want to, of course, thank every candidate for your time and for your attention tonight. We want to remind folks that this coalition is a large coalition. And over the course of this evening, of course, you've seen that the questions came from a lot of members of the coalition, but that's only a small fraction, a small handful of the voices that the coalition represents. It's a very large coalition, and we want to thank all the members of the coalition who put in so much time into making this event work, but we also want to make sure that people know that this is a coalition that takes this issue, takes this race very seriously. So candidates, you have 2 minutes to offer your closing statement, and this is also an opportunity if you had to put up a waffle sign during the earlier lightning round. It's an opportunity to address or to expound upon any of those issues. And as we go into the closing statement, I'm going to ask you guys to turn off your video so that it is only the candidate who is offering their closing statement being seen live. And we'll start, Arthur Hunter, with you. And I will turn my video off as well. I'll come onto the screen when you have 10 seconds left. And I think that you also see a message in the chat box when you have 10 seconds left. So, Mr. Hunter, you may begin.
Thanks, James. And thanks to the DA's coalition for inviting us tonight. You know, in regards to the waffle in which the pastor started regarding the death penalty, I would not bring a death penalty based on racial animosity, that's for sure. But, you know, this election is about how we can change the district attorney's office and the way it's been operating for the last 50 years. You know, and it's not about how glib or polished you are or just saying what people want to say. And nor is it about giving rehearsed answers. You know, and Jason stated, you know, he wished he could have won the race in 2008, but I wish he would have ran against Canizero in 2014. And so this election is about your record and what you have done, and you had the opportunity to do something. You know, it's about Robert Jones, who spent 25 years for crimes he didn't commit. And I was the first judge to give him a hearing. And after listening to that hearing, set a bail or bond that his family could afford. He was released and the charges were subsequently dismissed. It's about Keir Stewart, who I awarded more than $180,000 because he too was also wrongfully convicted. It's about Katina Curley. Katina Curley was convicted of second-degree murder for killing her husband, even though she had been beaten and abused by her husband for years. And she was sentenced to a life sentence. But after 11 years, she was given a new trial. And I found her not guilty of second-degree murder. And one of the consequences of that case was that now victims of survivors can have expert testimony in their trials. And so it's not about, you know, what you say. It's about you and the criminal justice system you want to live under. It's about what kind of district attorney you want to leave that criminal justice system. One who is fair or unjust, effective or chaotic, right or wrong. I've done the work. I've walked the walk. I've protected the community as a police officer. I was fair as a judge. And I won't be afraid to make the right thing. And
thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. And next we'll hear from Jason Williams. 2 minutes.
I've been fighting bad policy, the bad policy that have come out of South White Street for years. Every single time Leon Canizero trampled on people's rights, not just during campaign season. Now, I did that from City Hall, but the folks who had a front row seat to Leon's injustice sat quietly by in robes on a bench every single time he committed one of these atrocities. All the candidates right now might be talking about reform, but they're riding a wave of progressive policies because it's popular now. I ran on these same policies in 2008 against Leon Canizero because I knew his policies were going to ruin lives in this city. I did not sit back quietly and build up a retirement pension and then join a 12-round fight already in the 9th round. It is one thing to talk about reform. It is wholly different to bring it, and wholly different to be willing to fight for it at personal cost. I've done that. Fighting for reform is going to take courage. I'm the only candidate with a real track record of actually bringing tangible reform. Please measure your next DA not by what they say at these forums, by what they've done with their lives and their careers. I am the only DA who at every forum has said he is against the death penalty. He is against charging adults as juveniles. He's against the habitual offender law. I am against money bail, and I am for DA parity. Our legal system is implicitly racist and unfair. And if somebody can't say that, then they can't be your DA. If somebody can't be against the DA, can't be against the death penalty, then they cannot be our next DA. Just like taking down racist monuments or changing street names, we have to reckon with the legacy of racism and these Jim Crow era policies and practices that have gone on for far too long by the Connick administration, by the Landrum administration, and by the Canizero administration. We have to redesign this system from top to bottom, and I'm the only one who has a proven track record of doing just that.
Mr. Williams, thank you very much. And then we will move to Kiva Landrum. Kiva Landrum?
Thank you. You know, my parents raised me with the highest standards of integrity and honesty. And I have fought my whole career and worked my whole career with those same standards, and they have never been questioned. I have never been accused of a crime. My honesty and my integrity has never been placed at issue. Mr. Williams continues to throw veiled threats at me and question my integrity and question my experience. But what I can tell you is this. I have worked my entire career for the people of New Orleans, and I stand before you as a candidate for district attorney, working again for the people of New Orleans. Mr. Williams wants you to believe that he is going to stand for the poor people of our city, when in fact he has made himself a millionaire off the backs of the people of New Orleans. I don't live in a mansion on a hill. He does. Let me say this. My career and my experience speaks for itself. But in order to do this job and stand forward, you have to have someone who has the experience. Mr. Williams stood before us this evening and said that he is going to rewrite the policies of our police department. I don't know if he's running to be our district attorney or our city attorney, because that is not the job of our DA. What I know is that I will fight to make our community whole and heal it. These grandstanding, Trump-like divisive remarks will only divide this office from the New Orleans community anymore. I will stand to reform our bail practices, stand to unite this community and link people with the services that they need. That is why I am running to be our district attorney. That is why I stepped away from the bench to make sure that we can heal New Orleans with the district attorney's office. Thank you.
Kiva Landrum, thank you very much. And Jason Williams and Arthur Hunter, if you would, and Kiva Landrum as well, if you would bring your videos live again. Just want to thank all three of you for joining us tonight.
Sure.
You know, I know the campaign trail can be grueling and difficult, and the hours are tremendous. But I think all of us really appreciate that you are all willing to dedicate yourselves to this really important role for the city of New Orleans. And so we thank you for running as candidates, and we thank you for your time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, James.
You're welcome. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I want to give a shout out to my wife, Melissa Harris Perry. You know, she for many years hosted a television show, and so it was her job to to manage panels. And every time I have to do this, I remember just how talented she must be, because it is certainly a serious task to do so and to keep things in order. So,
you did a good job, James. Appreciate it. Good job.
Thank you very much. I'm trying.
Yes.
So look, for everyone who's still watching on Facebook Live, there are 147 of you. We want to thank you again for joining us. For the more than 300 people who are joining still on Zoom, we want to thank you as well for joining us and for participating. And we want you to spread the word. We want you to spread the word about the People's DA Coalition. We want you to help make clear to folks that it is a real resource. Election day is around the corner, and the People's DA Coalition represents formerly incarcerated people. They represent crime survivors. They represent people who were wrongly convicted, and they represent families with incarcerated loved ones. This is a coalition that's comprised of over 30 organizations who are all focused on reforming the criminal justice system in our city and in our state.